Signal cycle, mid-cycle, and sequence cycle. Those are the three FLDs that are displayed on our chart. Now, there is an FLD for each and every cycle in our nominal model, and we will be learning later what a nominal model is. It is simply a list of cycles that we use to analyze the price movements of the market that we are trading. And so there is an FLD for each and every one of those cycles. The bad news is that there are in fact an infinite number of cycles that influence our financial markets. And so obviously we do not want to be plotting the FLD for each and every cycle. And so what we do is we focus on three of them for each time frame. I have simplified the display of the sentient FLD indicator so that all we are seeing are the three FLDs. Here they are. The signal cycle FLD is the pink colored line, the mid-cycle FLD is the orange colored line, and the green line is the sequence cycle FLD. We also, of course, have our cycle table displayed at the top left of the chart, and you can see that the table provides the color coding reference for each one of these cycles. And so on this time frame, this is a 5-minute chart, the pink cycle is the 100-minute cycle, and therefore the pink line is the 100-minute cycle FLD. The orange line is the 3-hour cycle FLD, and the green line is the 6-hour cycle FLD. What is an FLD? It is in fact a very simple line. It is the median price displaced to the right by half the wavelength of the cycle in question. The median price is of course the mid price between the high and the low of each bar. You can display the median price using the sentient FLD indicator if you like, and we will take a look at that in a moment. And so the FLD is simply the median price displaced to the right by half the wavelength. And that is why you get these repeated patterns. Notice how the signal FLD comes up and forms a peak over here, and then you get the mid-cycle FLD forming exactly the same peak over here. And if we scroll this chart to the left, you will see that the sequence cycle FLD does exactly the same thing. Now, displaying all of our FLDs in this manner, in other words, plotting the lines all the way back to the beginning of our chart, can make for a very messy chart. It gets very difficult to see what is actually going on. And so for that reason, in the sentient FLD indicator, we can determine how much of each FLD to actually display. We'll do that in the properties, so let's adjust those properties now. If you scroll down in your list of properties for the sentient FLD indicator, you can see there is a section of properties labeled plot lines. This determines the lines that are plotted, of course, in the indicator. So let's go through these inputs one by one. First of all, we can choose to plot the median price itself. Some people find this useful because interactions between price and the FLD lines are actually determined by the interactions between median price and the FLD lines. A genuine price cross between price and the FLD requires the median price of the bar to cross the FLD. So we're going to turn that on. We'll take a look in a moment at that median price on our chart. The next thing to point out is that the sentient FLD indicator smooths the FLD lines. This is not something that Hurst did, and in fact it is not something that we do on daily charts, because the daily charts work with unsmoothed lines. That is the traditional FLD discovered or defined by Hurst 50 years ago. But on intraday charts particularly, you will find that you need to smooth the lines because the unsmoothed median price can be very erratic because of the volatility that we find on our shorter time frame charts. And so by default we do smooth the lines. You can turn that off. You can also determine over how many bars the FLD should be smoothed. We recommend 3 bars. You should make this an odd number of bars over which you are smoothing the FLD. You could experiment with 5 bars or 7 bars. At the most, I would recommend 9 bars. Anything longer than 9 bars, you're going to run into trouble because of the fact that the FLD number, the number of bars by which the FLD is displaced, could then be fewer than the number of bars over which you are smoothing it, and that will cause problems. You can choose to plot your signal line, your your midline or your sequence line. In other words, you could turn some of these lines off. By default, all three of these lines are plotted on your chart. And now here in the signal number of waves, mid number of waves, and sequence number of waves, you can determine how much of the FLD should be plotted on your chart. If we hover the mouse over the label for the property, you can see that this number determines the number of waves in the past that each one of these lines will be plotted. A property of -1 or -1 will plot this line all the way back in the past, in other words, over all waves in the past. A number of 0 will only plot this line into the future. And if you enter a number greater than 0, that is the number of past waves that will be plotted. By default, and this is the configuration that I find most useful, we plot the signal cycle FLD 2 waves into the past. The mid-cycle FLD we do not plot in the past because we want to see that chart fairly clearly, so we do not clutter it up with the mid-cycle FLD or the sequence cycle FLD. By entering a figure of 0 in each of those boxes, we do plot that FLD into the future, but not into the past. Let's apply those properties and see what happens. Here you can see the standard configuration of the FLDs, where the signal cycle FLD is plotted by 2 waves into the past. That means that we can observe in the past where price has crossed the signal cycle FLD. As it did over here, it crossed down below the signal cycle FLD. We can also observe in the past times where price came up to the FLD and found resistance, as it did on each and every one of these bars over here and over there as well. We can also see, of course, where price crossed up above the FLD. Price has recently, as you can see, crossed down below the FLD again. This white line over here is the median line that we asked the FLD indicator to plot for us. You can see how the FLD is very simply the same as the median line, but it is displaced to the right on your chart. You can determine the exact point at which a price cross occurred by taking a look at the point at which the median price crosses the FLD. I've drawn that arrow a little skew, but there you can see the crossing point over there. This default configuration, in other words, not plotting the FLD lines too much into the past, provides us with a cleaner chart. By default, the median price is not displayed, but as you can see, you can turn it on if you like. And by keeping your charts fairly clean in this manner, you can observe the interactions more clearly between price and your signal cycle FLD. Remember that those interactions are the important ones because those interactions are the ones that we are using to make our trading decisions. So those are the 3 FLDs we have on our charts. In the next video, we're going to be speaking about the way in which price interacts with those FLDs.